The jet sat silent on the tarmac under a phoenix sun that bent air into shimmering waves. 2:15 in the afternoon, 112 degrees, and the kind of heat that made metal too hot to touch with bare hands.
We need to talk about this now.
The Gulfstream G650 gleamed white and silver. $52 million of precision engineering that refused to start. Victoria Hayes stood at the base of the boarding stairs, one hand shading her eyes, the other holding a phone pressed tight against her ear. Designer suit, charcoal gray, tailored to intimidate. Heels that clicked sharp and deliberate on concrete. Her voice carried across the private terminal apron, clipped syllables that tolerated no excuses. The board meeting starts in 3 hours. Los Angeles, $400 million on the table. I need this aircraft in the air in 30 minutes, or I need another solution now. The lead engineer, Cal Brennan, stood 10 feet away with a diagnostic tablet, sweat darkening the collar of his company polo. 3 mechanics clustered around him, younger men with certification badges clipped to their belts, and expressions that had shifted from confident to desperate somewhere in the last 40 minutes. Cal touched the screen, scrolled through data streams, shook his head. Miss Hayes, the APU, won't engage. All our diagnostics show green across the board. Fuel pressure normal, electrical systems nominal, starter motor responding to input. It should work. It just won't. Victoria ended her call without saying goodbye, turned that cold assessment on Cal. Should means nothing. I need it working, or I need to know when you can get it working. We've contacted the factory. They're sending a specialist team, but the earliest they can be here is 6 hours, maybe 8 with traffic from the plant. Unacceptable. Cal's jaw tightened. Miss Hayes, with respect, we've checked everything. This is a brand new aircraft, less than 60 days since delivery. The systems are operating within parameters. The problem is somewhere the computers can't detect. Then find someone who can detect what the computers miss. Cal had no answer for that. His team exchanged looks, the kind that said they'd exhausted their options and didn't appreciate being told to invent new ones. Victoria pulled up another number, placed another call. Her chief of staff answered on the first ring. Charter me a jet, Gulfstream or Bombardier, I don't care. Phoenix to Van Nuys, wheels up in 45 minutes. She listened for 3 seconds. I don't care what it costs. Book it. Inside the terminal building, past the yellow safety line that separated maintenance areas from client spaces, Marcus Sullivan was restocking a tool cabinet when he heard the commotion. Raised voices weren't unusual at private terminals, but the specific tone, urgent without panic, professional frustration hitting its limit, that pulled his attention. He walked to the edge of the restricted zone, stayed behind the painted line. Through the heat shimmer, he could see the Gulfstream, could see the cluster of engineers, could see a woman in a gray suit who radiated authority even from 100 feet away. Marcus recognized the body language. High-stakes crisis. Client who wouldn't accept delays. Mechanics running out of answers. He'd been in that position himself once. Different airport, different aircraft, different life. The dispatch call had come 2 hours earlier. Elite Aviation Services, the temp agency that kept Marcus on their rotation for auxiliary work. Basic maintenance support at the private terminal. 4-hour shift, $18 an hour cash at the end of the day. Stay in the maintenance area, don't approach client aircraft, don't interact with passengers. Marcus understood the rules. He'd been working under variations of them for 5 years. His uniform was faded, patches removed from the sleeves where his old airline's logo had been, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, a small tear near the shoulder seam he'd stitched himself because replacing the shirt cost money he needed for other things. Work boots with duct tape holding the sole together on the left foot. Oil stains that wouldn't wash out no matter how much detergent he used. He looked exactly like what he was. Someone the industry had pushed to the margins and forgotten. but Marcus could hear the APU from where he stood, could hear it trying to engage, could hear the specific pitch and rhythm of a startup sequence that almost worked but didn't. And buried underneath that, so faint most people would never notice, a harmonic irregularity that meant something specific. He'd heard that sound before. 8 years ago, Miami maintenance facility, Learjet 45 with a chronic restart issue that had stumped 3 different mechanics. Marcus had spent an hour just listening before he touched anything. APU starter relay, vibration loose from transport.
30 seconds to reseat the connection. Problem solved. The sound coming from Victoria Hayes's Gulfstream was identical. Marcus stood there for a long moment, watching Cal and his team run through another diagnostic cycle, watching the pilot in the cockpit try another restart sequence, watching Victoria Hayes check her watch with the impatience of someone who measured time in millions. He thought about Owen, 10 years old, 4th grade, getting off the school bus in 2 hours, expecting his dad to be waiting. Thought about the rent due in 5 days, $900 short even with this afternoon's work. Thought about the careful mathematics of survival he'd been running for 5 years, how one misstep could collapse everything. Then he thought about what his father had taught him before the cancer took him, before Sarah died and left Marcus raising Owen alone, before everything got complicated and hard. If you can fix it, fix it. The rest is just noise. Marcus stepped over the yellow line. His boots scuffed against hot concrete. The distance to the Gulfstream felt longer than it was, every step a calculation he was still making. Auxiliary staff didn't approach premium aircraft. Auxiliary staff didn't offer unsolicited advice to lead engineers with factory certifications and diagnostic equipment worth more than Marcus made in a year. Auxiliary staff stayed invisible. Cal saw him first, turned, frowned, took in the shabby uniform and the oil stains and the presence of someone who clearly didn't belong. "Excuse me, this is a restricted area." Marcus stopped a few feet from the jet, kept his voice level and respectful. "I know, I heard the engine. I think I might know what's wrong." One of the younger engineers actually laughed, cut it off quick when Cal shot him a look. Cal's expression shifted to something between irritation and amusement. "You think you know?" It wasn't a question. It was dismissal wrapped in professional politeness. "I'm a certified aircraft mechanic. I have experience with this model. I think the problem is in the APU starter relay." The second engineer, mid-30s with a crew cut and a wedding ring, turned fully around to look at Marcus. "Who are you?" "Marcus Sullivan. I was hired for auxiliary maintenance today." "So you're here to restock supply cabinets and empty trash bins." The heat in Marcus's face had nothing to do with the Phoenix sun. "I'm here to do whatever work needs doing. Right now, I'm telling you, I've seen this exact problem before, and I can fix it." The third engineer had joined them now, older than the others, gray in his beard, 30 years of experience in the set of his shoulders. He looked at Marcus the way you'd look at a stray dog that wandered into a 5-star restaurant. "Son, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this isn't a regional turboprop. This is a Gulfstream G650, $52 million of precision engineering. We have diagnostic computers, factory protocols, direct lines to the manufacturer. We don't troubleshoot by guesswork. I'm not guessing. The sound the APU makes when it tries to engage, that specific frequency with a harmonic drop on the 3rd cycle, that's a starter relay that's vibration loose. The connection is there, but it's not seated tight enough to maintain proper voltage under startup load. Your diagnostics won't flag it because technically the circuit is complete." Cal's eyebrows had risen during that explanation. "You diagnosed a $52 million aircraft by sound?" Yes. The younger engineer shook his head, not quite mocking, but close. We've already checked the relay connections. Twice. Did you check them by ear or by computer? By following proper diagnostic procedures? Then you missed it. Victoria had been on another call, but now she was walking toward them, heels sharp against the tarmac. She moved like someone who'd learned to command rooms before she could legally drink, and the decades since had only refined the skill. What's happening here? Cal straightened slightly, shifted his weight. Nothing, Miss Hayes. Just some auxiliary staff who thought he could help. The way he said auxiliary staff made it sound like an insult. Victoria looked at Marcus, really looked. The kind of assessment that took in every detail and calculated value in seconds. What she saw was a man in a worn uniform, someone who didn't belong anywhere near her aircraft, someone beneath the notice of people who measured time in board meetings and million-dollar decisions. Can you fix this? Her tone made it clear she expected the answer to be no. I believe I can, if you give me 60 seconds to check one component. The older engineer stepped forward. Miss Hayes, I strongly advise against this. We have protocols. We can't just let random maintenance workers. I'm not random. I have 12 years of experience as an aircraft mechanic. I was lead mechanic at Horizon Airways before. Was, the older engineer interrupted. Past tense. Which makes me wonder why you're working auxiliary maintenance now instead of with a major carrier. The implication hung in the air like the heat. If Marcus was any good, he'd still be with a real airline. The fact that he wasn't said everything anyone needed to know. Marcus felt the shame burn through him. The truth he couldn't defend against because explaining it would only make things worse. The past that followed him like a shadow, no matter how many yellow lines he stepped across. Victoria checked her watch. The movement was precise, deliberate. How long will it take to get factory technicians here? Cal consulted his tablet. Minimum 6 hours, possibly longer depending on their current assignments in traffic. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. Marcus could see the calculation happening, the cost of missing the meeting, the consequences cascading through whatever deal hung in the balance. 60 seconds, Marcus said again. That's all I'm asking. If I'm wrong, you've lost nothing. If I'm right, you make your meeting. Victoria looked at him, then at her engineers, then back at Marcus. Something in her expression shifted, not quite trust, but the desperate pragmatism of someone with no good options. You touch my aircraft and make things worse. I'll make sure you never work in aviation again. Marcus almost laughed, almost said he was already there, already at the bottom, already blacklisted by an industry with a long memory and no mercy. But he just nodded. Understood. Move. Marcus walked to the tail section, knelt at a specific access point near the auxiliary power unit housing. Small panel, easy to overlook if you weren't familiar with this exact configuration. He put his ear against the housing, listened past the heat and the ambient noise of the terminal, listened for that harmonic signature. There. He opened the panel with practiced hands, reached inside without needing to look. The starter relay sat exactly where it should, connections visible and apparently secure. But Marcus's fingers found what his eyes couldn't see, and the diagnostics couldn't measure. The relay connector, pressed into its housing but not quite flush, maybe 2 millimeters of play. Enough to maintain circuit continuity under static conditions, but not enough to handle the voltage spike of an actual startup sequence. The kind of thing that happened during transport. The kind of thing that would strand a $52 million aircraft while computers insisted everything was fine. Marcus pressed the connector firmly back into place, felt the click, felt the resistance change as metal seated properly against metal. He tested the connection with his fingers.
satisfied it would hold, then closed the panel and stood up. Try it now. The engineers looked at each other. Cal's expression said he thought this was a waste of time, but he'd play along to prove the point. He nodded to the pilot visible through the cockpit window. Run the startup sequence. The pilot's hands moved across controls. For a moment, nothing. Then the APU hummed to life, smooth and clean, no harmonic irregularities, no frequency drops. Perfect pitch. The main engines followed, turbines spinning up with that distinctive whine that meant everything was working exactly as designed. All systems green on the cockpit display. The tarmac went silent. Not the silence of malfunction, but the silence of shock. Every engineer stared. Victoria stared. Even the pilot looked stunned, visible through the windscreen with his mouth slightly open. Marcus stood there with his hands at his sides, shabby uniform and oil stains and duct-taped boots, while a $52 million jet purred to life behind him. Cal looked at his tablet, then at the jet, then back at his tablet. His face had gone pale. That's not possible. We checked that connection. It was secure. It was technically secure, just not tight enough to handle startup voltage. The diagnostics showed circuit continuity because under testing conditions it was continuous, but under load, with the voltage spike of an actual APU start, the connection resistance was too high. The second engineer walked to the access panel, looked inside, saw exactly what Marcus had fixed. A simple, loose connection, something a first-year apprentice could have caught if they'd known what to listen for, if they'd trusted their ears over their equipment. How did you know? Experience. I've seen this before. The sound is distinctive once you recognize it. Diagnostics won't flag it because technically the circuit is complete, just not optimized. You need human judgment to catch the difference. The older engineer was shaking his head, not in disagreement, but in something like disbelief. 12 years, you said? Where did you work before? And there it was, the question Marcus had been dreading since he stepped over the yellow line. The question that would end this moment of validation as quickly as it had begun. Horizon Airways. I was lead mechanic for their regional fleet out of Boston. Recognition flickered across the older engineer's face. Then something else. Realization mixed with memory. Meyer. You're Marcus Sullivan. You're the one from the Boston incident. The temperature on the tarmac seemed to drop despite the Phoenix heat. Yes. The other engineers were looking at each other now, pulling out phones, searching. Marcus could imagine what they were finding. News articles from 5 years ago, headlines that told half the story and none of the truth. Victoria stepped forward. Her expression had changed, no longer impatient, now curious in a way that felt dangerous. What incident? The older engineer hesitated, then spoke with the careful tone of someone reciting facts he'd heard third hand. 5 years ago, Horizon Airways Flight 892, Boston to Miami. Emergency landing in Raleigh-Durham due to hydraulic system failure. Significant damage to the aircraft, but no passenger injuries. The airline grounded their entire fleet for inspection. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Sullivan was terminated immediately after. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Why? Marcus took a breath. This was it. The moment where his credibility evaporated, where the skill he'd just demonstrated became irrelevant because the past was louder than the present. Because I was the last mechanic who signed off on that aircraft's inspection log. And when the hydraulic system failed, someone needed to be held accountable. But it wasn't your fault. The voice came from behind them. Everyone turned. The airport manager was walking across the tarmac, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back and a tablet in her hands. She had the look of someone who'd spent decades navigating the politics of aviation and had stopped caring about whose feelings got hurt by the truth. I just pulled up the incident report, the full NTSB file, not the public summary. She stopped next to Victoria, turned the tablet so everyone could see. Mr. Sullivan filed a maintenance discrepancy report 3 days before Flight 892 departed. He flagged a potential issue with the hydraulic reservoir seal, requested additional inspection before the aircraft returned to service. Marcus said nothing. He'd learned years ago that defending himself only made things worse. Let the records speak. Let people draw their own conclusions. It never helped, but at least it was honest. The manager continued reading from the screen. Your supervisor, a senior engineer named David Chen, overruled your recommendation, stated the aircraft was airworthy according to specification tolerances, signed off on it himself. She looked up, and when the seal failed during flight, exactly as you predicted, the airline blamed the last mechanic in the chain of responsibility. They blamed you, even though you documented the exact problem that caused the failure. The silence on the tarmac was absolute. Victoria's expression had gone cold, but Marcus could see it wasn't directed at him. Where's the supervisor now? The manager checked the tablet. Promoted. He's currently director of maintenance for Horizon's entire Western regional operation. Victoria's jaw tightened. Marcus watched the wheels turn behind her eyes. She was a CEO. She understood office politics, understood scapegoating, understood how organizations protected their own at the expense of the disposable. Mr. Sullivan. Victoria's tone had completely changed. Why didn't you fight this? Why didn't you go public? Marcus looked at her, really looked, past the designer suit and the cold authority, at someone who was asking a question she actually wanted answered. Because I had a 5-year-old son. Fighting would have meant lawyers I couldn't afford, media attention that would have followed us everywhere. Even if I won, which was unlikely, I'd be marked as someone who caused problems. No airline would touch me. He paused. At least this way I could still work, under the radar, enough to keep Owen fed and housed. The brutal calculus of survival, the choice between vindication and subsistence. Victoria absorbed it, and something in her expression shifted. So you let them destroy your career to protect your son? I'd do it again. The lead engineer who'd mocked Marcus earlier looked sick. Mr. Sullivan, I owe you an apology. A serious one. Marcus nodded, accepted. But the older engineer wasn't done. He was looking at Marcus with something like awe. You diagnosed this problem in 30 seconds? Something our entire team missed with diagnostic computers and factory training. Because you listened. Because you have experience we don't teach anymore. He gestured at the younger engineers. These men learn from manuals and computer models. They've never learned to trust their instincts, to hear what a machine is telling them. He looked at Victoria. Miss Hayes, if you're smart, you'll hire this man today. Now, before someone else realizes what just happened here. Victoria was already pulling out her phone. What's your current salary, Mr. Sullivan? Marcus hesitated. I make about $38,000 a year. Contract work, no benefits. Victoria didn't even blink. I want to talk to you about a position. Director of Aircraft Maintenance for my fleet. But first, I need to make some calls. She turned to Cal. Get this aircraft ready for departure. I'm leaving in 15 minutes. To Cal's credit, he just nodded and started moving. Victoria walked a few steps away, phone already against her ear. Marcus stood there, not quite sure what had just happened, watching his entire life pivot on 60 seconds of listening to a sound most people couldn't hear. The older engineer approached, extended his hand. "I'm Tom Reeves, 30 years in this industry. What you did today was remarkable. Not just the fix, the fact that you were right about Flight 892 and still got destroyed for it." He paused. "I've seen it happen before. Good mechanics crushed by bad management. It's why I work private sector now. At least here, competence matters more than politics." Marcus shook his hand. "Sometimes." Tom smiled, bitter and knowing. "Sometimes." The younger engineers had dispersed, some looking ashamed, others thoughtful. The one who'd laughed earlier stopped as he passed Marcus. "I'm sorry. For assuming, for being dismissive. You didn't know. I should have asked instead of judging."
"That's on me." Marcus accepted it with a nod. The apology didn't change anything, but it didn't make things worse, and that counted for something. Victoria finished her calls, walked back. 3 conversations, each one clipped and efficient. Her legal team, her head of security, her chief of staff. Marcus had only caught fragments, but the words background check and full employment history had been clear enough. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm leaving now. I'll have my team contact you tomorrow. We'll set up a meeting to discuss specifics. In the meantime, I want you to know that I take what happened to you seriously. The system that destroyed your career for doing the right thing, that system needs to be dismantled. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Victoria's voice had an edge that said this wasn't negotiable. "I've built my career on exposing corruption and incompetence. What happened to you is both." She paused. "But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Right now, thank you for fixing my aircraft." "And for teaching my engineers a lesson in humility." She walked toward the boarding stairs, stopped halfway up, turned back. "What you told them about your son, about choosing his stability over your vindication, that took more strength than fighting would have. Remember that." Then she was gone, disappearing into the cabin. The engines powered up. Cal supervised the ground crew. Within 10 minutes, the Gulf Stream was rolling toward the runway. Marcus walked back across the tarmac, back past the yellow line, back to the maintenance area where he'd started the day. But everything felt different now. Lighter. Like a weight he'd been carrying for 5 years had shifted. Not gone, but no longer crushing. His phone buzzed. Text from Elite Aviation Services. "Client requested you specifically for next week. 3 days, inspection work. Details tomorrow." Marcus stared at the message. Client requested you specifically. 5 years of being invisible, and now someone wanted him by name. He finished his shift restocking tool cabinets, organizing supply inventory, the same work he'd been doing when he heard the commotion. But his hands moved differently now, more certain, more like they belonged to someone who mattered. At 3:30 he clocked out, took his cash payment in an envelope, walked to his truck in the employee lot. The Ford F-150 was 15 years old, rust showing through the paint on the wheel wells, a crack across the windshield he couldn't afford to fix. But it started when he turned the key, and that was enough. The drive home took 20 minutes through Phoenix traffic, east toward Mesa, where rent was cheaper and questions were fewer. His apartment complex was built in the 80s, beige stucco and parking spots marked with faded paint. Second floor, Unit 2C, 2 bedrooms and a kitchen where the faucet dripped no matter how tight you turned the handle.
Owen was waiting on the breezeway when Marcus pulled in. 10 years old, dark hair that needed cutting, wearing the backpack Marcus had bought second-hand 3 months ago. The boy's face lit up when he saw the truck. "Dad, you're early!" Marcus climbed out, caught Owen in a hug. "Had a good day, buddy?" Owen pulled back, looked at his father's face with the kind of perception kids develop when they learn to read moods for survival. "What happened?" "I fixed something important. Something nobody else could fix." Owen grinned. "Because you're really good at fixing things." Marcus's throat tightened. "Yeah." They went inside. The apartment was small and old, but Marcus kept it clean, kept it organized, kept it feeling like a home, even when everything else was temporary. Owen's backpack went on the kitchen table. Homework came out, math worksheets with problems that took concentration. Marcus made dinner while Owen worked. Spaghetti, the kind that came in a box with sauce from a jar. But there was ground beef tonight because the cash payment meant they could afford it. Garlic bread from frozen dough he'd thaw and bake. Not fancy, but more than ramen. "How was school?" "Good. We're learning about the Wright brothers in history. Did you know they were bicycle mechanics before they invented airplanes?" Marcus smiled. "I did know that. Mrs. Patterson said mechanics back then had to understand everything about how machines worked. Not like now with computers." "Mrs. Patterson sounds smart." "She is." Owen looked up from his homework. "She asked what my dad does. I said, you fix airplanes." "What did she say?" "She said that's important work, that people's lives depend on mechanics doing their jobs right." Marcus had to turn away, focus on stirring sauce, because the tightness in his chest was making it hard to breathe normal. She's right. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same routine they'd had for 5 years. Owen talked about school, about his friends, about the book they were reading in English class. Marcus listened, asked questions, was present in a way he'd learned to be when Sarah died, and everything fell on him. After dinner, Owen took his shower, brushed his teeth, put on pajamas that were getting too small. Marcus made a mental note to budget for new ones. Growing kids needed new clothes and school supplies and 1,000 small things that added up faster than contract work paid. Owen climbed into bed, old sheets with superhero patterns he'd outgrown but didn't complain about. Marcus sat on the edge, picked up the book they'd been reading together, a story about adventure and friendship that seemed aimed at kids but worked for adults too. He read 2 chapters. Owen's eyes got heavy halfway through the second. By the time Marcus closed the book, the boy was asleep, breathing deep and even, face peaceful in a way that made every sacrifice worth it. Marcus stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his son sleep. Thought about Victoria Hayes and her phone calls, about Tom Reeves and his handshake, about Cal Brennan's face when the APU hummed to life. Thought about tomorrow and whatever came after. Then he went to the living room, sat on a couch that sagged in the middle, pulled out his laptop. The same laptop he'd used for 5 years to send applications that went into black holes, to search for jobs that never materialized, to maintain the fiction that persistence would eventually overcome a blacklist. But tonight he opened his email and found 3 new messages. The first from Elite Aviation Services confirming next week's work. The second from a number he didn't recognize, subject line, Employment Inquiry, Hayes Capital. The third from an address that made his stomach drop.
Alan Rodriguez, Union Representative, Horizon Airways.
Marcus hadn't heard from Alan in 5 years, not since the day he'd sat in the resignation meeting, silent, while Marcus signed away his career, complicit in the machinery that ground up people who spoke truth to power. The email was short. "Marcus, I know I have no right to contact you. I know I failed you when you needed someone to stand up for what was right. I've carried that guilt for 5 years. If you're willing to talk, I have information you deserve to see. Information about what really happened. AR. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. Owen asleep in the next room. A job offer may be coming tomorrow. A past that wouldn't stay buried no matter how deep he tried to dig. If you can fix it, fix it. His father's voice, memory more than sound. The rest is just noise. But sometimes the noise was all you had. Sometimes the noise was everything you were running from. And sometimes, when you finally stopped running, the noise caught up and demanded answers you weren't sure you wanted to give. Marcus closed the laptop without responding to Alan's email. Tomorrow was soon enough for decisions. Tonight, he needed sleep. Needed to be ready for whatever came with the sunrise. Needed to believe that stepping over that yellow line had changed something fundamental and not just delayed the inevitable. He checked on Owen one more time before bed. The boy hadn't moved, still peaceful, still safe. Marcus pulled the door mostly closed, left it open enough to hear if Owen called out, the same way he'd done every night since Sarah died. His own room was smaller, barely space for a bed and a dresser. No decorations except a framed photo of Sarah holding newborn Owen, both of them smiling like the future held nothing but good things. Marcus looked at it every night, said goodnight to a woman 5 years gone, promised her again that their son was okay. He climbed into bed, set his alarm for 5:30, lay in the dark thinking about sounds only he could hear and yellow lines he'd finally crossed, and the question of whether redemption was something you earned or something you stumbled into when you stopped believing it was possible. Sleep came slow, but it came, and with it, dreams of engines humming perfect pitch and a 10-year-old boy who thought his father was good at fixing things, which was the only opinion that really mattered. The call came at 7:15 the next morning. Marcus was pouring cereal for Owen when his phone lit up with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Sullivan, this is Jennifer Park, Executive Assistant to Victoria Hayes. Miss Hayes would like to meet with you this afternoon at 2 o'clock to discuss a consulting opportunity. Would you be available? Marcus looked at Owen, who was reading the back of the cereal box with the intense focus only 10-year-olds brought to nutritional information. Looked at the kitchen calendar where today showed 3 question marks because work hadn't been confirmed yet. I can make that work. Excellent. The address is 4500 East Sky Harbor Circle, Hangar 7. Security will have your name at the gate. Please bring documentation of your certifications and employment history. The call ended before Marcus could ask questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Consulting opportunity, not a job offer. Not yet. Just a door opened enough to see what was on the other side. Owen looked up from his cereal. Was that about work? Maybe. I have a meeting this afternoon. With the airplane lady from yesterday? Marcus hadn't told Owen details, just that he'd fixed something important. But kids heard things, absorbed information through proximity and attention. Yeah, with her. Is she going to hire you for real? The hope in Owen's voice was careful, guarded by 5 years of learning not to expect too much. Marcus wanted to promise yes, wanted to give his son certainty, but he'd learned the cost of promises he couldn't guarantee. I don't know yet, buddy, but it's a good meeting, better than we've had in a while. Owen nodded, went back to his cereal. The boy had developed a resilience that broke Marcus's heart every time he saw it. 10 years old and already practiced at managing disappointment. After breakfast, Marcus walked Owen to the bus stop, waited until the yellow doors closed and the engine pulled away.
watched until the bus turned the corner and disappeared, the same routine that anchored every morning. Back in the apartment, Marcus pulled his certification documents from a filing cabinet that held everything important. A&P license, still current because he paid the renewal fees even when it hurt. Training records from his time at Horizon, letters of recommendation from pilots who'd requested him specifically, dated before the blacklist made his name radioactive. There was also a folder he hadn't opened in 2 years. Legal documents from the resignation, the severance agreement with its non-disparagement clause, the separation notice that said voluntary resignation when everyone knew the truth. Marcus stared at it for a long moment, then put it back unfiled. Some things were better left buried. He showered, shaved, put on the cleanest shirt he owned, dark blue button-down with only minor fraying at the collar, khakis that were too old to be fashionable but too functional to replace. The same worn boots because they were all he had. In the mirror, he saw a 42-year-old man who looked older, lines around his eyes from squinting at small parts in bad light, calluses on his hands that no amount of soap could completely soften. Someone who'd been ground down but not broken, weathered but still standing. The drive to Sky Harbor took 40 minutes through midday traffic. Hangar 7 sat on the private aviation side, a massive structure of steel and glass that housed corporate jets the way museums housed art. Marcus showed ID at the security gate, waited while the guard checked his list, tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The gate lifted. The guard pointed toward a visitor's lot. Inside, the hangar was climate-controlled cool, a relief from the October heat that still pushed 90 degrees. 4 aircraft sat in careful arrangement, 2 Gulfstream G550s, the G650 he'd fixed yesterday, and a Bombardier Global 7500 that probably cost more than Marcus would earn in 3 lifetimes. A woman in business casual approached, tablet in hand. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Jennifer Park. Miss Hayes is expecting you." She led him past the aircraft to a glass-walled office that overlooked the hangar floor. Inside, Victoria Hayes sat behind a desk made of brushed steel and dark wood, reviewing documents on a computer screen that was larger than most televisions. She looked up when Marcus entered, gestured to a chair across from her. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Marcus sat. The chair was leather, ergonomic, more comfortable than anything in his apartment. His certification folder felt inadequate in his hands, documentation of a career that had ended in disgrace no matter what the truth said. Victoria closed her laptop, gave Marcus her full attention. "I'm going to be direct because that's how I operate, and I think you'll appreciate it. Yesterday you fixed a problem in 60 seconds that 3 certified engineers with diagnostic equipment couldn't solve in an hour. You did it using experience and instinct that no computer can replicate. That tells me you have value most people don't recognize." Marcus waited. There was a but coming. There always was. "I also had my team run a comprehensive background check. I know about Flight 892. I know about your supervisor, David Chen. I know about the maintenance discrepancy report you filed and how the airline made you disappear to protect someone more valuable to them." She paused. "What I need to know is whether you're interested in moving past that, or whether you're still carrying it like a weight that's going to affect your judgment." The question was fair, even if it landed like a punch. "I'm not interested in revenge, if that's what you're asking. I made peace with what happened because I had to. My son needed stability more than I needed vindication. That calculation hasn't changed." "Good, because I'm not offering you a platform for revenge. I'm offering you a trial consulting contract. $5,000 a week for 4 weeks. During that time, you'll inspect my entire fleet, identify any issues, and train my maintenance team on diagnostic techniques that go beyond computer readouts. At the end of 4 weeks, if you've proven your value, We'll discuss a permanent position. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, too careful for that, but possibility. Why a trial? You saw what I can do. Victoria's expression didn't change. Because hiring someone permanently requires trust, and trust takes time to build. You've been blacklisted for 5 years. I need to verify that you're still sharp, that the skills haven't degraded, that you can work with a team. The trial protects both of us. You get paid regardless of the outcome. I get verification before committing long term. The logic was sound. More than sound, it was the kind of calculated risk management Marcus would have recommended himself. But it also meant 4 weeks of uncertainty, 4 weeks of proving himself while wondering if he'd measure up. What happens if I don't pass the trial? You walk away with $20,000 and a reference letter from me stating you performed contract work to my standards. That's more than you had yesterday. And if I do pass? Then we negotiate a permanent position as Director of Aircraft Maintenance. Salary in the range of $120,000 annually, full benefits, signing bonus. But that conversation happens after you've earned it. Marcus looked at her, trying to read intent behind the professional distance. What else? Victoria leaned back in her chair. I told you yesterday that the system which destroyed your career needs to be dismantled. I meant that. But I'm not doing it for charity. I'm doing it because corrupt systems create liability, and I don't tolerate liability in anything I touch. She paused. Part of your role, if you accept the permanent position, will be helping me build an industry-wide anonymous reporting system for mechanics who identify safety concerns. I'll fund it. You'll design it. Together, we make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to someone else. There it was, the real agenda. Not just hiring a mechanic, but recruiting a partner in institutional reform. Marcus should have seen it coming. People like Victoria Hayes didn't fix individual problems, they fixed entire systems. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning. Jennifer will provide contract details for your review. She stood, extended her hand. But before you decide, understand something. I don't make offers like this often, and I don't make them to people I don't believe in. Marcus shook her hand, felt the grip that was firm without being performative, professional without being cold. Why do you believe in me? You don't know me. Victoria's expression shifted, something almost human breaking through the CEO mask. 8 years ago, I was CFO of a Fortune 500 company. I found discrepancies in the books, evidence the CEO was committing securities fraud. I reported it to the board. She paused, and Marcus could see the memory still had edges. They chose to believe him instead of me. Fired me, launched a criminal investigation, destroyed my professional reputation. It took 2 years of legal warfare to prove the truth. The CEO went to prison. The company paid $40 million in settlements. I used that money to start Hayes Capital. Marcus absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. You know what it's like. I know what it's like to be right and punished for it. I know what it's like to lose everything because someone more powerful needed a scapegoat. She met his eyes. And I know what it's like to rebuild from nothing, with people watching to see if you'll fail. So yes, Mr. Sullivan, I believe in you. Because I see myself in your story, and I refuse to let the same system win twice. The words hung between them, more revelation than Marcus had expected from someone who presented like polished steel. I'll have an answer tomorrow. Good. Jennifer will show you out. The meeting was over. Marcus stood, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. Miss Hayes? Thank you for looking past the blacklist. I didn't look past it. I looked through it to see what they were trying to hide. Marcus left the hangar with contract documents in his hands
and questions spinning through his mind. 20,000 guaranteed, or a gamble on something permanent? Safety or possibility? The mathematics of survival versus the risk of actually living. He drove back to Mesa in afternoon traffic, arrived home an hour before Owen's bus, sat at the kitchen table reading contract language that was surprisingly straightforward. No hidden clauses, no traps, just terms that laid out exactly what Victoria had described. $5,000 per week for 4 weeks. Access to all aircraft and maintenance records. Authority to ground any aircraft deemed unsafe, subject to Victoria's final approval. At the end of the trial, either party could terminate without cause. It was more money than Marcus had seen in 5 years. More than enough to catch up on rent, replace Owen's 2 small clothes, fix the crack in the windshield, maybe even save something for the future. But it was also 4 weeks of exposure, 4 weeks of being visible again, 4 weeks where people who remembered Flight 892 might remember Marcus Sullivan. His phone buzzed. Text from Elite Aviation Services. Regret to inform you that your assignment next week has been canceled. Client went with another contractor. We'll contact you when new opportunities arise. Marcus stared at the message, understanding exactly what it meant. Someone had made a call. Someone had said Marcus Sullivan's name in the wrong room, and suddenly work evaporated. The blacklist reasserting itself like gravity pulling everything back toward the inevitable. The front door opened. Owen came in with his backpack and a paper in his hand, face bright with accomplishment.
Dad, I got an A on my science test. Mrs. Patterson said I explained airplane engines better than anyone else in the class.
Marcus stood, took the paper, looked at his son's handwriting and the big red A circled at the top. I'm proud of you, buddy. This is excellent work. She asked where I learned all that stuff about how engines work. I said, you taught me. Owen's pride was uncomplicated, pure in a way that made Marcus's chest tight. His son didn't know about blacklists or severance agreements or the careful mathematics that kept them housed and fed. Didn't know his father was 1 bad month from disaster. But Owen knew Marcus could fix things, knew his father taught him about engines and helped with homework, and showed up every single day. That was the truth that mattered more than anything else. Marcus made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories. After Owen fell asleep, he pulled out the contract again, read it 3 more times, looking for problems he wouldn't find because Victoria Hayes didn't build empires by hiding traps in paperwork. At 9:30, his laptop chimed with an email. The address made his jaw tighten. Alan Rodriguez. The message was longer this time, more desperate. Marcus, I understand if you never want to speak to me again. What I did, staying silent while they destroyed you, is something I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I have information you need to see. Documents David Chen thought were deleted. Emails proving he ordered IT to purge your MDR from the system. Evidence of a pattern. 4 other mechanics terminated over 5 years for raising safety concerns Chen ignored. I kept copies of everything because some part of me knew it was wrong, even when I was too afraid to act. You deserve to know the full truth. If you want it, I'm ready to share it. If you want me to disappear, I'll respect that too. But please, at least know that what happened to you wasn't isolated. It was systematic. And it's still happening. Alan Marcus closed the laptop harder than necessary. He didn't want this. Didn't want the past dragging him backward when tomorrow offered something forward. Didn't want evidence that would demand action when he'd chosen peace. But 4 other mechanics, pattern of behavior, still happening. If you can fix it, fix it. He opened the laptop again, typed a response before he could talk himself out of it. I'll meet you. 1 conversation,
Then I decide what happens next. The reply came 30 seconds later. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., coffee shop on Mill Avenue in Tempe. Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve. Marcus sent a confirmation, then closed the laptop and tried to sleep.
It came in fragments, broken by dreams of yellow lines and deleted emails, and the sound of hydraulic systems failing at 35,000 feet. Morning arrived too early. Marcus got Owen ready for school, made breakfast, walked him to the bus stop. The routine was muscle memory, comfortable in its predictability, even when everything else felt uncertain. At 9:30, he drove to Tempe, found the coffee shop Alan had specified, a small place near Arizona State's campus where students worked on laptops and nobody paid attention to anyone else. Perfect for a conversation nobody wanted overheard. Alan Rodriguez sat in a corner booth, looking older than 55, gray hair thinning, shoulders carrying weight that went beyond physical. He stood when Marcus approached, extended a hand that trembled slightly. Marcus, thank you for coming. Marcus shook a hand, sat across from him, said nothing. Let Alan fill the silence with whatever justification he'd been rehearsing for 5 years. I don't have excuses. David Chen threatened my job if I backed you. I had a daughter starting college, a mortgage, 23 years toward pension. I chose my security over your career, and I've hated myself for it ever since. The honesty was raw enough to be credible. Marcus nodded once, an acknowledgement without forgiveness. Alan pulled a flash drive from his pocket, set it on the table between them. Everything's on here. The original MDR you filed, the emails from Chen to IT ordering deletion, memos showing he overrode safety concerns from 4 other mechanics between 2019 and last year. Financial records I copied before I quit, transactions between Chen's wife and a parts supplier owned by his brother-in-law. You quit? 6 months ago. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit in meetings knowing what I knew. Couldn't represent union members while protecting management corruption.
Alan's hands were shaking harder now. But quitting didn't fix what I broke. Didn't give you back what I helped take. Marcus looked at the flash drive. Small thing, plastic and metal, containing evidence that could reopen everything, could vindicate him, could destroy David Chen. Could also pull Marcus back into the exact fight he'd chosen to walk away from. Why now? Why not give me this 5 years ago? Because 5 years ago I was afraid of losing everything. Now I've lost it anyway. My job, my pension. My daughter barely speaks to me because she found out what I did. I've got nothing left but the truth. And you deserve to have it, even if you do nothing with it. Marcus picked up the flash drive, turned it over in his fingers. What do you want from me? Nothing. Alan's voice cracked. I want you to do whatever brings you peace. Sue Horizon, go public, bury it forever, I don't care. I just need you to know that you were right, that I was wrong.
That the guilt of staying silent is worse than any consequence of speaking up could have been. The coffee shop hummed with background noise. Students talking, espresso machines hissing, music playing low. Normal life happening around them while they sat in the wreckage of decisions made years ago. Marcus pocketed the flash drive, stood to leave. Wait. Alan reached across the table, desperate. Tell me you'll use it. Tell me it matters. I don't know yet. Marcus looked at the man who'd chosen cowardice over courage and was now drowning in regret. But I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. It's more than I deserve. Marcus left the coffee shop, drove back toward Mesa with the flash drive burning a hole in his pocket. He should look at it.
should verify Alan's claims, should do something with evidence that could change everything. Instead, he went home, opened his laptop, typed an email to Jennifer Park. I accept the trial consulting contract.
When do I start?
The response came 15 minutes later. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Welcome to the team. Marcus sent confirmation, then pulled out the flash drive, looked at it for a long moment, and put it in his desk drawer under a stack of old bills. Not buried, but not visible. Available if needed, but out of sight for now. Some decisions required time. Some truths could wait, while other truths got their chance. Owen came home from school with more papers, more accomplishments, more proof that life moved forward, whether or not the past got resolved. They made dinner together, spaghetti again because Owen claimed it was his favorite, and Marcus suspected the boy just said that to make things easier. After Owen went to bed, Marcus sat on the sagging couch and thought about Victoria Hayes and her offer, about Alan Rodriguez and his flash drive, about the careful balance between justice and peace. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Sullivan? This is Cal Brennan. We met yesterday at the terminal, Marcus remembered. Lead engineer who'd dismissed him before the APU fix proved otherwise. I wanted to apologize again. More than that, I wanted to explain something. Cal's voice was steady but carried an undercurrent Marcus couldn't quite identify. Tom Reeves told me the full story about Flight 892, about your MDR and Chen overruling you. I did some research after you left. Found 4 NTSB reports over the past 5 years, all Horizon aircraft, all involved maintenance oversights that mechanics had allegedly missed. Allegedly, yeah. Cal paused. The thing is, I know 3 of those mechanics. Worked with them at different points. They weren't careless. They were thorough to the point of being obsessive. And all 3 of them are working contract jobs now. Blacklisted, same as you. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. You think Chen? I think Chen has been scapegoating mechanics to cover his own decisions for years. I think you're not the first, and you won't be the last. And I think someone needs to stop him before he kills people. Why are you telling me this? Because Tom was right yesterday. What you did, diagnosing that APU by sound, that's experience we're losing. The industry is pushing out people like you in favor of computer diagnostics and factory protocols, and we're getting worse at actually understanding how aircraft work. Cal's voice hardened. If you're working with Miss Hayes now, you should know she has resources. Legal team, investigative capacity, political connections. If anyone can expose what Chen's been doing, it's her. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to consider that maybe this isn't about you anymore. Maybe it's about the mechanics Chen's destroying right now. Maybe it's about the passengers flying on aircraft he's clearing when he shouldn't. The words landed heavy. Marcus had been thinking about his own vindication, or lack thereof, his own choice between peace and justice. But Cal was right. This was bigger than Marcus Sullivan's career. I'll think about it, that's all I'm asking. Cal paused again. For what it's worth, I'm glad Miss Hayes is hiring you. You're exactly the kind of mechanic we need training the next generation. The call ended. Marcus sat in the dark apartment, phone in one hand, weight of multiple obligations pressing down from all sides. Fix what's broken. But sometimes what's broken was bigger than one loose connection, bigger than one man's willingness to step over yellow lines. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of all mornings that changed everything. Marcus dropped Owen at the bus stop, drove to Hangar 7, showed his ID at the security gate with a sense of unreality that made the whole thing feel temporary.
Jennifer Park met him with a badge that said Consultant, Maintenance, and a tablet loaded with aircraft documentation. You'll start with the G550s, full inspection, document any issues, prepare a report by end of day. The team is waiting to meet you. The team turned out to be 6 mechanics, a mix of ages and experience levels, all looking at Marcus with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Tom Reeves was there, the older engineer from the tarmac who'd recognized the truth when everyone else saw only failure. Tom stepped forward, offered his hand again. Good to see you made it official. These are your people now. He gestured at the others. Rita Chen, no relation to your former supervisor, 28 years experience, best electrical diagnostics I've ever seen. Danny Torres, fresh A&P but learns fast. Mike Powell, hydraulic specialist. Sarah Kim and James Wallace, both airframe experts. Marcus shook hands, learned names, saw the question in their eyes. Who is this guy, and why does he get authority over us?
I know you have questions.
Marcus started, keeping his voice level. About who I am, where I came from, why Miss Hayes hired someone you've never heard of? Fair enough. Here's what you need to know. I spent 12 years as lead mechanic for a major carrier. I was terminated after filing a safety report my supervisor ignored. I've spent the last 5 years doing contract work, staying current, maintaining certifications. Yesterday, I fixed Miss Hayes' G650 when diagnostics couldn't. Today, I'm here to share what I know and learn what you know. If you have a problem with that, tell me now. Rita spoke first, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned respect through decades of competence. I don't care about your history. I care whether you know what you're doing. Prove that. We're good. Fair. Marcus gestured at the nearest G550. Let's start with this one. Full inspection, methodical, no shortcuts. I want to see how you work, and you can see how I work. Then we decide if this partnership makes sense. They worked through the morning, Marcus observing more than directing, watching how each mechanic approached their specialty, noting techniques and blind spots. Rita's electrical work was meticulous. Danny asked good questions. Mike knew hydraulic systems the way some people knew scripture. Around noon, while inspecting the landing gear on the second G550, Marcus found something. A microfracture in an actuator housing, barely visible. The kind of thing that would pass visual inspection, but fail catastrophically under stress. He called Rita over, pointed it out. What do you see? She looked, pulled out a magnifying glass, examined the hairline crack. That's a problem. We'd catch it eventually, but not necessarily before the next flight. How would diagnostics read it? Probably wouldn't. The actuator still operates within parameters. The crack hasn't propagated enough to affect function. She looked at Marcus with new respect. How did you spot it? Experience. I've seen actuator failures. They start like this. He straightened up. We're grounding this aircraft until we replace the actuator. Does Miss Hayes know? She will. Marcus pulled out his phone, sent a text to Victoria. G550 number 2, grounded. Landing gear actuator has microfracture. Recommend replacement before next flight. The response came 90 seconds later. How certain are you? 90%. I'm not risking the 10. Another pause, then. Good answer. Grounded. Take G550 number 1 instead. Marcus showed the exchange to Rita. She smiled, not quite warmth, but acknowledgement. You just passed your first test. She tested you, and you stood your ground. I didn't stand up to her. I stood up for her safety. That's the job. Rita nodded slowly. Yeah, that's the job. The afternoon continued with inspections and small talk. The team slowly warming to Marcus's presence as he proved he knew what he was doing without needing to prove he was in charge. By 5 o'clock, they'd documented 15 minor issues and one major one, compiled reports, prioritized repairs. Victoria appeared in the hangar as they were finishing, walked straight to Marcus. "Show me the actuator." Marcus led her to the grounded G550, pointed out the fracture. She examined it herself, pulled out her phone, took photos. "How long until replacement?" 2 days if we prioritize it. Mike can source the part tomorrow, install Wednesday. "And you're certain this would have failed?" "Not certain it would have failed on the next flight. Certain it would have failed eventually, possibly at the worst possible moment." "I'm not willing to bet your life on probably." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Most mechanics would have let it go, waited until the next scheduled inspection, avoided grounding an aircraft over a maybe. Most mechanics haven't seen what happens when maybe becomes definitely. I have. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. "This is exactly why I hired you. Keep doing this." She left without elaboration, heels clicking on concrete, already on her phone, arranging whatever needed arranging when a multi-million-dollar aircraft got grounded on a consultant's recommendation. Rita came over after Victoria disappeared. "You know what you just did?" "Made sure she doesn't die in a landing gear collapse?" "No." Rita's smile was genuine now. "You earned trust faster than anyone I've seen. Most new hires would have hedged, waited, been political. You just called it straight. That matters here." Marcus wanted to say he'd lost the ability to be political 5 years ago, that hedging and waiting were luxuries he couldn't afford, but he just nodded. Good to know. The team left at 5:30. Marcus stayed later, reviewing maintenance logs, comparing records against what he'd observed. Around 6:45, his phone rang. Victoria. "Are you still at the hangar?" "Yes." "My office. Now." Marcus walked across the hangar floor, climbed the stairs to the glass-walled office. Victoria sat behind her desk with her laptop open and an expression that looked carved from ice. "I received a call 30 minutes ago from Horizon Airways, their legal department." She turned the laptop around so Marcus could see the email on screen. "They're threatening a lawsuit if I hire you permanently, claiming you're violating your severance agreement's non-disparagement clause by discussing the circumstances of your termination." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I haven't said anything publicly. I haven't disparaged anyone." "I know." Victoria's voice was cold with the kind of anger that didn't need volume. "I told them that." "I also told them that if they pursue this, I'll countersue for tortious interference, and I'll make discovery so invasive they'll wish they'd stayed silent." She closed the laptop. "But you need to know they're watching, and they're scared." "Scared of what? I'm one mechanic. I can't hurt them." "You can if you talk. You can if the truth about David Chen comes out. You can if other mechanics realize they're not alone." Victoria leaned forward. "Which brings me to my real question. How far are you willing to take this?" Marcus thought about the flash drive in his desk drawer, about Alan Rodriguez's evidence, about Cal Brennan's phone call, and 4 other mechanics blacklisted like him. "I told you I'm not interested in revenge." "This isn't revenge. This is prevention." Victoria's eyes were hard. "Chen is still there, still making the same decisions, still destroying careers to cover his mistakes."
How many more mechanics before someone stops him? How many unsafe aircraft before passengers die? The same argument Cal had made, the same logic Marcus had been avoiding because accepting it meant accepting everything that came with it. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we build something that makes Chen irrelevant.
An anonymous reporting system where mechanics can flag safety concerns without fear of retaliation. A third-party review board that investigates every report. Federal protection for anyone terminated within 6 months of filing. She paused. I'll fund it personally. $5 million to start. But I need someone who understands the problem from the inside. Someone who's lived the consequences of speaking up. You want me to be the face of this? I want you to be the architect. The face can be someone else if you prefer anonymity. But the design, the protocols, the understanding of what mechanics actually need, that has to come from you.
Marcus looked out the glass wall at the hangar floor below, at aircraft worth hundreds of millions, at the team he'd just started building trust with. If I do this, Horizon will fight harder. Chen will make it personal. Let him try. Victoria's smile was sharp. I've made a career of exposing corrupt systems. I don't lose. Marcus thought about Owen, about stability, about the careful balance he'd maintained for 5 years. Thought about 4 other mechanics working contract jobs because they'd spoken truth. Thought about the next Marcus Sullivan filing the next MDR that would get ignored. If we do this, we do it right. No grandstanding, no media spectacle. We build something that actually works, and we make it impossible for people like Chen to destroy it. Agreed. And I need one thing first. Marcus pulled out his phone, found Jennifer Park's contact. I need you to extend my trial period. Victoria's eyebrow rose. Why? Because if I'm going to design a reporting system, I need to prove I can still do the job it's meant to protect. I need your team to trust me completely, and that takes more than a week. He paused. Give me the full 4 weeks to prove myself. If at the end I've earned it, then we talk about the bigger project. Victoria considered this, then nodded slowly. 4 weeks. But understand something, Mr. Sullivan. I'm not patient by nature. If you're going to do this, commit fully or walk away. I don't tolerate half measures. Neither do I. That's why I'm asking for time to do it right. She extended her hand across the desk. 4 weeks. Then we change how this industry operates. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the weight of commitment settle over him like a tool belt. Heavy but familiar. Uncomfortable but necessary. He left the hangar at 7:30, drove home through evening traffic with his mind spinning through implications and obligations. Owen was with the neighbor when Marcus arrived, had already eaten dinner, was working on homework at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. Marcus paid her the daily rate, walked Owen home through the warm Arizona evening. How was work, Dad? Good. I found a problem nobody else caught. Probably saved someone from a bad landing. Owen looked up at him with uncomplicated pride. Because you're good at finding problems. Marcus ruffled his son's hair. Yeah, buddy. Because I pay attention. At home, after Owen went to bed, Marcus pulled out the flash drive, plugged it into his laptop. The files opened into folders labeled by mechanic name, by date, by aircraft incident. 47 emails from David Chen to IT, memos to supervisors, financial transactions between Chen's family and parts suppliers. A pattern so clear, it looked deliberate. Marcus read through it all, feeling anger build and then fade into something colder. Resolution without rage, understanding without forgiveness. He copied everything to an encrypted backup, then sent an email to Victoria with the files attached. Evidence you'll want your legal team to review. Source is protected. Use it however serves the larger goal. The response came at 11:43 p.m. Already forwarding to counsel. This is worse than I thought. We're not just exposing one bad actor. We're exposing systemic failure. Marcus closed the laptop, turned off the lights, lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Somewhere across the country, David Chen was sleeping in a house paid for by corruption, secure in the belief that his protection would hold. Somewhere, 4 other mechanics were lying awake, wondering if they'd ever work real jobs again. Somewhere, aircraft were flying with problems mechanics had been afraid to report. And somewhere, in a glass-walled office in Phoenix, Victoria Hayes was building a case that would bring the whole rotten structure down. Marcus fell asleep thinking about yellow lines and the moment you decide to cross them, about the difference between fixing what's broken in front of you and fixing the system that keeps breaking it, about a 10-year-old boy who thought his father was good at solving problems and didn't know yet just how complicated some problems were. 3 weeks into the trial contract, Marcus stood in the hangar teaching diagnostics to a room that had stopped questioning his presence. Rita, Danny, Mike, Sarah, James, and 2 new hires Victoria had brought on specifically for the safety initiative that was quietly taking shape behind closed doors. The lesson today was about sounds computers couldn't quantify, about the difference between parameters within tolerance and systems operating perfectly. Marcus played recordings through the hangar's sound system, engine startups with subtle variations that told stories if you knew the language. This one. He paused the playback.
What do you hear?
Danny leaned forward, eyes closed in concentration. Something in the fuel delivery? Pressure fluctuation? Good instinct, but listen to the 3rd compression cycle, the interval between ignition points. Rita got it first, always did. Fuel injector. One of them is microseconds slow. Not enough to flag diagnostics, but enough to create uneven combustion over time. Exactly. And over time means what? Accelerated wear on the combustion chamber. Sarah had caught on fast, her airframe expertise translating well to propulsion systems. We'd catch it eventually at inspection, but only after damage accumulates. So we catch it now. Marcus advanced to the next recording. The point isn't to replace diagnostics. Computers are excellent at what they're designed for. The point is to recognize what they're not designed for, where human judgment still matters. The session ran another hour, Marcus walking them through scenarios he'd encountered over 12 years, translating experience into principles they could apply. It felt strange being someone who taught instead of someone who disappeared. Strange in a way that was starting to feel necessary. After the team dispersed, Victoria appeared from the office stairway, tablet in hand, and an expression that meant news. FAA wants to meet. Next week in D.C. They reviewed the Chen evidence, cross-referenced it with NTSB reports, and they're opening a formal investigation into Horizon's maintenance practices. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. That's good. It's a start. Victoria's tone suggested she saw further down the road than Marcus wanted to look. But they also want testimony from the mechanics Chen scapegoated, including you. I thought we were building this so I could stay anonymous. You can file reports anonymously. But if the FAA investigation leads to enforcement action, if this becomes the case study that changes industry standards, they'll need first-hand testimony. She paused, letting that sink in. I can't force you, but you should know that 3 of the other 4 mechanics have already agreed to testify. They're willing to go public because someone finally gave them protection to do it. Who's the 4th? A mechanic named James Martinez, fired 3 years ago after flagging a wing bolt assembly he thought was torqued incorrectly. Chen overruled him. The aircraft flew anyway, no incident occurred. Martinez moved to Colorado, works at a ski resort now, won't return calls. Marcus understood that impulse. Some people walked away and meant it. Some people built new lives that didn't include the wreckage of old ones. I need to think about it.
You have until Friday. Victoria turned to leave, stopped. For what it's worth, the reporting system is working. We launched the pilot program 2 weeks ago with 4 carriers. 63 reports filed so far. 11 flagged for immediate investigation. 2 aircraft grounded before problems became critical. How many retaliation attempts? 0 confirmed. But the system's anonymous, so we wouldn't necessarily know about attempts that failed. That's the point. Victoria nodded, something like approval crossing her expression. Yes, that's exactly the point. Thursday evening, Marcus drove to Owen's school for parent-teacher conference, the kind of routine obligation that grounded everything else in reality. Mrs. Patterson was Owen's 4th-grade teacher, mid-50s with the patient competence of someone who'd spent decades shaping young minds. Mr. Sullivan, Owen is doing excellent work. His reading comprehension is above grade level, his math skills are solid, and he participates thoughtfully in class discussions. She pulled out a folder of Owen's assignments, papers marked with high grades and teacher comments. But I wanted to talk to you about something else. Marcus tensed reflexively, 5 years of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Owen wrote an essay last week about people he admires. Mrs. Patterson handed him a paper, 3 paragraphs in careful 10-year-old handwriting. I thought you should see it. Marcus read his son's words. I admire my dad because he fixes things nobody else can fix. He knows how to listen to airplane engines and hear what's wrong. He lost his job for telling the truth, but he didn't give up. He worked hard for 5 years so I could have food and a home. Now he has a real job again, and he's teaching other people how to fix things the right way. My dad says if you can fix something, you should fix it, even if it's hard. That's what heroes do. Marcus's vision blurred. He had to set the paper down, focus on breathing until the tightness in his chest loosened enough to speak. He's a remarkable young man. Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle. He speaks about you with such pride, and based on this essay, I understand why. I didn't know he knew any of that, about losing my job, about the 5 years. Kids hear more than we think, and they understand more than we give them credit for. She smiled. Owen knows his father is a good man who does the right thing even when it costs him. That's a powerful lesson. Marcus folded the essay carefully, put it in his pocket. Thank you for telling me. The drive home took 20 minutes through evening traffic, enough time for Marcus to read the essay 3 more times at red lights, enough time to understand that Owen had been watching all along, absorbing lessons Marcus hadn't meant to teach, but couldn't have avoided. At home, he made dinner while Owen did homework, the familiar rhythm of their evenings, but tonight felt different, weighted with the knowledge that his son saw him clearly, saw the struggle and the resilience, and decided both were worth admiring. After Owen went to bed, Marcus sat on the couch with his phone, staring at Victoria's text from that afternoon. Friday deadline for DC testimony decision. He thought about 3 mechanics who'd agreed to go public, thought about James Martinez in Colorado who'd chosen silence, thought about Owen's essay and the line about heroes doing what's right even when it's hard, thought about the difference between fixing broken things and fixing broken systems. He typed a response. I'll testify, but I need conditions. Owen's name stays out of it. Media access is controlled. And if this turns into a circus, I walk. Victoria's reply came 90 seconds later. Agreed on all points. My PR team will handle media. Legal will prep you. Thank you for doing this. Marcus set the phone down, wondered if he'd just made the right decision or the one that would unravel everything he'd built. Friday afternoon,
Rita found Marcus in the hangar, working through maintenance logs on the Bombardier. "Got a minute?" Marcus looked up from the tablet. "What's on your mind?" Rita pulled out her own phone, showed him a news article. "Horizon Airways under federal investigation for maintenance irregularities. Sources say former employees provided evidence of systematic safety violations." The article was light on specifics, but heavy on implications, exactly the kind of coverage that made airlines nervous and investigators aggressive. "You're one of those former employees." It wasn't a question. "Yeah." Rita nodded slowly, processing. "The team's been talking. We figured it was something like this." Her expression was hard to read.
You planning to stay after the trial ends, or is this whole thing temporary while you burn down your old employer? The bluntness was appreciated. Marcus set down the tablet, gave Rita his full attention. "I'm planning to stay. The investigation is separate. It's about stopping something that's still happening, not revenge for what already happened to me. But it is personal. Of course it's personal. I lost 5 years because I told the truth. But that's not why I'm doing this." Marcus gestured at the aircraft around them. "I'm doing this because your job is to keep these machines running perfectly. And if you can't flag a problem without losing your career, then the system is broken, and people die eventually. Fixing that matters more than anything personal." Rita studied him for a long moment. "The team wants you to know we're in. Whatever you need for the investigation, testimony, documentation, we've got your back." She paused. "Also, Danny's uncle is a mechanic at Southwest." Word spreading about the anonymous reporting system. He's filed 2 reports already. Said it's the first time in 20 years he felt safe flagging marginal calls. "That's what we built it for." "I know." Rita's smile was small but genuine. "Just wanted you to know it's working, and that we respect what you're doing, even if it makes things complicated." After she left, Marcus returned to the maintenance logs with renewed focus. The work was concrete, knowable, something he could control when everything else felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold. Monday morning, Marcus flew to Washington, D.C. on Victoria's G650, the irony not lost on him that he was traveling on an aircraft he'd fixed, that his seat in the cabin was worth more than his old annual salary. Victoria was aboard, reviewing legal briefs, preparing for meetings with her own attorneys, while Marcus met with the FAA. The federal building in downtown D.C. was glass and concrete, security checkpoints and identification badges, the machinery of government investigation grinding through evidence with bureaucratic precision. Marcus sat in a conference room with 3 FAA investigators, 2 NTSB representatives, and Victoria's attorney who'd flown in specifically to protect Marcus's interests. The lead investigator was a woman named Sandra Chen, no relation to David, who spoke with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades building airtight cases. "Mr. Sullivan, we've reviewed the documents provided through your counsel. We've cross-referenced them with our own records. We need your first-hand account of what happened with Flight 892. And we need you to walk us through the pattern of behavior you observed from David Chen prior to your termination." Marcus spent 3 hours recounting details he'd tried to forget. The hydraulic seal inspection, the MDR he'd filed, Chen's dismissal of his concerns, the verbatim conversation, the emails that disappeared, the resignation meeting where his union representative sat silent while Horizon erased him. The investigators took notes, asked clarifying questions, circled back to points that needed emphasis. Marcus answered everything, kept his voice steady, stuck to facts without editorial. Let the evidence speak. Around noon, they took a break. Marcus stepped outside with Victoria's attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Morrison, who'd made her reputation defending whistleblowers. "You're doing well.
Keep the same tone in the afternoon session. Facts, timeline, no emotion. They're building a case against Chen and possibly against Horizon's systemic practices. Your credibility is crucial. What happens after this? Rebecca checked her phone. Depends on what they find. Best case, Chen is forced out and Horizon implements reforms.
Worst case, this becomes criminal fraud investigation and you're a material witness for years. And the other mechanics? They're testifying tomorrow, but you're the linchpin because your case has the clearest documentation and you're the one who actually predicted the failure that occurred. The afternoon session focused on the other mechanics Alan had documented, on patterns Marcus had observed, on whether Chen's behavior seemed intentional or negligent. Marcus chose his words carefully, distinguished between what he knew directly and what he'd learned later, made sure the investigators understood the difference between correlation and causation. By 4 p.m. they were done. Sandra Chen closed her notepad, looked at Marcus with an expression that might have been respect. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Sullivan. What you've provided today will be instrumental in our investigation. She paused. I want you to know that cases like this, where mechanics face retaliation for reporting safety concerns, these are exactly why we need better protections. The system you've helped design with Miss Hayes, that's the kind of structural change we need across the industry. I hope it makes a difference. It already has. We've received 7 reports through your platform that led us to investigate issues we wouldn't have known about otherwise. That's 7 potential disasters prevented. Marcus flew back to Phoenix that evening, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical work. Victoria sat across the cabin, also tired, both of them understanding they'd just set something in motion that would take months or years to fully resolve. How do you feel? Marcus looked out the window at clouds lit gold by sunset. Like I finally told the truth, and someone actually listened. Good, because tomorrow the truth gets louder. The news broke Wednesday morning. FAA launches major investigation into Horizon Airways maintenance practices. Industry sources confirm multiple whistleblowers provided evidence of safety violations and employee retaliation. David Chen, Director of Maintenance for Horizon's Western Region, has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Marcus's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. News outlets, industry contacts, people he hadn't heard from in 5 years suddenly wanting comments. He ignored all of it, sent Owen to school with instructions not to talk to anyone about Dad's work, went to the hangar where the team was already assembling. Rita met him at the door. Media's been calling here too. Victoria's handling it, but they want quotes from you. They're not getting them. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her the statement Victoria's PR team had prepared. This is the only comment anyone's giving. The rest is not our circus. The statement was brief, professional, attributed to Hayes Capital and the Anonymous Reporting System Initiative. No names except Victoria's, no specifics that could compromise the investigation. Just acknowledgement that industry-wide safety reforms were underway. The team worked through the day with renewed intensity, as if the public exposure of corruption demanded they prove the alternative worked better. Marcus ran inspections, reviewed diagnostics, caught 3 minor issues and 1 major fuel system problem that would have grounded the G550 if left unchecked. Around 3 p.m., Victoria called him to her office. She had CNN on the screen, muted, showing footage of Horizon Airways facilities with chyrons about federal investigations. Chen's attorney released a statement denying all allegations. Claims you're a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta. Expected. There's more. Victoria pulled up an email on her laptop. Horizon's legal team sent this an hour ago. They're offering a settlement. Full reinstatement of your employment record, formal apology, financial compensation in the 7-figure range. In exchange for your silence and withdrawal from the FAA investigation. Marcus stared at the screen, at numbers that could change Owen's entire future, at words that acknowledged what Horizon had done while asking him to pretend it never happened. What did you tell them?
Nothing yet. This is your decision, not mine.
Marcus thought about 7 figures, about college funds and house down payments, and never worrying about rent again. Thought about Owen's essay and the line about heroes doing what's right even when it's hard. Tell them no. The investigation continues. My testimony stands, and they can keep their apology. It's worthless if it comes with conditions. Victoria's smile was sharp and approving. I'll draft the response. One more thing. Marcus met her eyes.
If they make this uglier, if they go after Owen or try to paint me as unstable,
I need you to protect my son. That's non-negotiable. Already arranged. Victoria's tone left no room for doubt. I have a security team monitoring your apartment, your son's school, any approach from media or Horizon representatives. Nobody gets near Owen without going through me first. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is the cost of doing the right thing. The least I can do is make sure you don't pay it alone. Thursday evening, Marcus picked up Owen from school, noticed the black SUV parked discreetly down the street that hadn't been there before. Victoria's security keeping watch. Inside the apartment, he made dinner while Owen talked about a science project on renewable energy, oblivious to the fact that his father had just turned down enough money to retire. After Owen went to bed, Marcus opened his laptop and found an email from an address he didn't recognize. Mr. Sullivan, my name is Patricia Wright. I was a mechanic at Horizon for 11 years. I was terminated 4 years ago after reporting a landing gear issue David Chen dismissed. I never knew what happened to you until this week's news. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for proving we weren't crazy or incompetent. Thank you for building something that might stop this from happening to someone else. You're doing hero's work, whether you feel like a hero or not. The email included a phone number and an offer to testify if needed. Marcus forwarded it to the FAA investigators, added Patricia to the list of voices that were finally being heard. His phone rang. Unknown number, but Marcus answered anyway. Mr. Sullivan, this is James Martinez. I'm the mechanic who works in Colorado now, the one who wouldn't take calls. Marcus sat up straighter. What changed your mind? I saw the news, saw Chen on leave, saw the investigation expanding, saw 3 other mechanics willing to testify. He paused, and Marcus could hear traffic in the background. I've been running for 3 years, working a job I'm overqualified for because I was afraid to stay in aviation. But you didn't run. You rebuilt. And now you're making sure Chen can't hurt anyone else. I had help. I couldn't have done this alone. Neither can I. That's why I'm calling. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything about the wing bolt assembly, about how Chen threatened my license if I pushed the issue, about how I left the industry because I couldn't trust the system anymore. Martinez's voice strengthened. But more than that, I want to come back. I want to work for someone who values safety over schedules. If you or Miss Hayes need mechanics for this new venture, I'm available. Marcus felt something shift, understanding that this was bigger than investigation or vindication. This was rebuilding, was creating space for people who'd been pushed out to come back in.
Send your resume to Victoria Hayes at Hayes Capital. I can't promise anything, but I can promise you'll get a fair look. That's more than I've gotten in 3 years. Thank you. The call ended. Marcus sat in the dark apartment, thought about Patricia Wright and James Martinez, and how many others were out there, mechanics who'd been crushed by the same system, who'd been waiting for someone to prove it was safe to speak. Friday afternoon, the FAA released a preliminary statement. Investigation into Horizon Airways maintenance practices has uncovered evidence of systemic safety violations and employee retaliation. The agency is expanding its review to include other carriers.
Anonymous reporting systems for aviation maintenance personnel are being fast-tracked for industry-wide implementation. Victoria forwarded the press release with a single line of commentary. We just changed the industry. Congratulations. Marcus showed it to the team during their afternoon briefing.
Rita read it twice, then looked at him with something like wonder. You know what this means? Mechanics at every carrier are going to have protection now. The thing that happened to you, it can't happen the same way anymore. It can still happen, but now there's a system to fight back that doesn't require lawyers and life savings. Danny spoke up, younger and more earnest than the veterans. My uncle called last night. Southwest is implementing the reporting system next month. He cried on the phone because for the first time in his career, he won't have to choose between speaking up and keeping his job. That's what we built it for. Marcus looked around the room at faces that had become familiar, trusted. Not to protect me, to protect everyone who comes after. The 4 weeks ended on a Tuesday. Marcus arrived at the hangar to find Victoria waiting with a contract folder and an expression that suggested she'd already made decisions. Your trial period is complete. Your team rates you as exceptional. The safety initiative you designed is being adopted across the industry. The FAA investigation you enabled is creating systemic change. She pushed the folder across her desk. I'm offering you permanent employment as Director of Aircraft Maintenance. Salary $120,000 annually, full benefits, signing bonus as discussed. Additionally, a consulting role with the Safety Reporting Initiative at $50,000 per year. She paused. You've earned this 10 times over. Marcus opened the folder, scanned terms that were exactly what she'd promised 4 weeks ago. No surprises, no traps, just recognition that his value was worth protecting. I accept. Good, because I'm also promoting you to Vice President of Safety Operations, effective immediately. Additional $30,000 in base salary. Your role expands to overseeing safety protocols across all Hayes Capital operations, training other companies' mechanics on the reporting system, and serving as expert witness in any litigation arising from the FAA investigation. That's a lot of trust. You've demonstrated you're worthy of it. Victoria's expression softened marginally. More importantly, you've shown me that integrity under pressure is the rarest and most valuable quality in this industry. I don't intend to let that go. Marcus signed the contracts, felt the weight of permanence settle over everything. Not just a job, but a career. Not just survival, but purpose. What about Owen? The media attention, the investigation, all of this exposure. Already handled. Victoria pulled up a photo on her tablet showing a modest house in a good Scottsdale neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, yard, top-rated school district. I'm buying this property as a corporate asset. You'll live there rent-free as part of your compensation package. The school has been briefed on potential media attention and has protocols in place. Owen will be safe, and his education won't be disrupted. Marcus looked at the house, at the kind of stability he'd stopped believing was possible. Why are you doing all this? Because 8 years ago, when I was being destroyed for telling the truth, nobody helped me. I had to fight alone with everything I had, and it nearly broke me. Victoria's voice carried weight that went beyond business. I told myself if I ever had the power to change that for someone else, I would. You gave me the chance to keep that promise. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but Marcus meant them completely. Don't thank me yet. The real work starts now. Chen's attorney is fighting the investigation. Horizon is launching a PR campaign claiming this is all fabricated. The industry is watching to see if we actually deliver on the safety system or if it's just good intentions that fade. She met his eyes. Are you ready for that? Marcus thought about 5 years of contract work,
about Owen's essay, about mechanics calling to say they felt safe speaking up for the first time in their careers. I've been ready. I just needed the platform. Then let's use it. The move to Scottsdale happened over a weekend. Marcus had accumulated so little in 5 years that everything fit in his truck and a rental trailer. Owen's face when he saw the house, saw his own room twice the size of the old one, saw the yard with space for a dog, that made everything worth it. Can we really live here? Yeah, buddy, we really can. Owen ran through the rooms, touching walls like he needed to confirm they were real, came back to Marcus with tears in his eyes. You did it, Dad. You fixed everything. Marcus knelt down to Owen's level. I fixed some things. We fixed some things together. But this isn't the end. It's just different. Better, but different. That night, after Owen fell asleep in his new room, Marcus sat on the back patio looking at stars that were the same as anywhere else, but felt different from a house that was actually secure. His phone buzzed with a message from Rita. Saw the news about your VP promotion. Well deserved. Team's planning celebration drinks Friday if you're interested. Another message from Alan Rodriguez. I heard about your new position. I'm glad something good came from the hell I helped create. If you ever need anything, call me. A third from Sandra Chen at the FAA. David Chen resigned from Horizon Airways today rather than face termination. The investigation continues into broader institutional failures. Your testimony was instrumental. Thank you. Marcus set the phone down, breathed in desert air that smelled like possibilities instead of limitations. The following Monday, he stood in front of 200 mechanics at an industry conference in Las Vegas, speaking about the anonymous reporting system, about how it worked and why it mattered. His voice steady, his message clear. 5 years ago, I filed a safety report and lost my career. I'm not unique. I'm not special. I'm just one mechanic who refused to stay silent when I saw something wrong. He paused, let that land. But that silence almost cost lives. That silence destroyed careers. That silence perpetuated a system where doing the right thing meant risking everything. The room was absolutely quiet. 200 people who understood exactly what he meant. The system we built isn't about revenge. It's not about punishing airlines or managers. It's about creating space for truth without consequences. It's about making safety concerns louder than schedule pressure. It's about ensuring the next mechanic who sees something wrong can speak up without losing everything. When he finished, the standing ovation lasted 90 seconds. Mechanics approached him after, thanking him, sharing their own stories of reports they'd been afraid to file, of problems they'd ignored because the cost of speaking was too high. A young mechanic, maybe 25, waited until everyone else had dispersed. Mr. Sullivan, I just got my A&P license last year. I was told the industry was changing, that older mechanics were being phased out because computers could do the work better. Marcus smiled, recognizing himself in the young man's uncertainty. Computers are tools. Excellent tools for what they're designed for. But they're not replacements for judgment, for experience, for the ability to hear what a machine is telling you. He put a hand on the young mechanic's shoulder. Learn the computers, master the diagnostics, but never stop listening. Never stop trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. That's what separates adequate mechanics from exceptional ones. The young man nodded, understanding dawning. One more thing. Marcus met his eyes. If you ever see something unsafe, file the report. Don't let anyone tell you to stay quiet. The system exists to protect you now. Use it. Friday evening, Marcus picked up Owen from his new school, noticed how the boy's shoulders were looser, how he talked about friends and projects without the careful guardedness that poverty taught. They stopped at an animal shelter on the way home. Inside, Owen found a 3-year-old mutt named Copper. Reddish fur and soulful eyes. A dog that had been waiting for someone to see past the other, shinier options. "This one, Dad. Kenley?" Marcus filled out the adoption paperwork while Owen sat on the floor, letting Copper lick his face, both of them finding exactly what they needed. At home, in a house with a yard and stability and future, Marcus made dinner while Owen played with Copper in the grass, the evening air filled with laughter Marcus hadn't heard enough of in 5 years. His phone rang. Victoria. "Turn on CNN." Marcus found the remote, switched on the television to see a news anchor discussing the FAA investigation, showing footage of Horizon Airways facilities, graphics explaining the anonymous reporting system. And in a related development, Hayes Capital announced today that their aviation safety reporting platform has been adopted by 14 major carriers, with 6 more pending implementation. Industry analysts say this represents the most significant change to aviation maintenance oversight in decades. The architect of the system, Marcus Sullivan, a former airline mechanic who was himself a victim of the retaliation the system prevents, is being hailed as a transformative figure in aviation safety. Victoria's voice came through the phone.
You're officially famous. How does it feel?
Marcus watched Owen through the window, watched Copper chase a ball, watched sunset paint Arizona sky in colors that meant peace. "It feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good, because tomorrow we have work to do. 3 more carriers want training, the FAA wants testimony on proposed regulations, and I need you to interview candidates for the new safety division we're launching. Tomorrow. Tonight I'm making spaghetti for my son and teaching him how to take care of his first dog." Victoria's laugh was genuine, warm in a way Marcus hadn't heard before. "Perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing." The call ended. Marcus turned off the television, went outside to where Owen was throwing the ball, where Copper was learning to retrieve, where normal life was happening in a way that felt extraordinary because it hadn't always been available. Owen ran over, breathless and happy. "Dad, Copper's really smart."
I think we can teach him all kinds of tricks.
"I think you're right." Marcus sat on the patio step, Copper immediately coming over for attention. "You know what's important about taking care of a dog?" "What?" "Consistency. Showing up every day. Paying attention to what he needs even when you're tired or busy. Being responsible for something other than yourself." Owen nodded seriously, understanding this was about more than dog care. "Like how you took care of me all those years when things were hard." Marcus pulled his son close, Copper wedging between them, demanding inclusion. "Yeah, like that. Except now things are going to be easier. Not perfect, but easier. Because you didn't give up. Because we didn't give up." Marcus looked at his son, at eyes that saw more than they should have to, but also saw hope now. "You were the reason I kept going, buddy. Every single day." They sat there as the sun finished setting, Copper eventually settling between them. 3 beings who'd found their way to stability through persistence and luck, and the willingness to believe tomorrow might be better than today. Inside, Marcus made dinner while Owen set the table, Copper following both of them, hoping for dropped food. The spaghetti was the same recipe as always, but it tasted different in a kitchen that belonged to them, in a house where rent wasn't uncertain, with a future that felt possible instead of theoretical. After Owen went to bed, Marcus stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching the boy sleep with Copper curled at the foot of the bed, both of them peaceful in a way that justified every sacrifice. His phone buzzed with a final message. Tom Reeves from the maintenance team. "Heard you're VP now. Couldn't happen to someone more deserving. The industry's changing,
because you refused to stay silent. That matters more than you probably realize.
Marcus typed a response. It matters because people like you recognized competence over credentials. Because Victoria gave me a platform. Because mechanics across the country were ready for something better. I just happened to be in the right place when the door opened. Tom's reply came quickly. No, you forced the door open. There's a difference. Marcus closed the phone, walked to his own room where Sarah's photo still sat on the dresser, where memories coexisted with present reality. We did it. His voice was barely a whisper. Owen's safe. We're stable. And maybe we made things better for other people too. I hope you'd be proud. He climbed into bed in a house that was theirs, in a life that had been rebuilt from wreckage, with work tomorrow that mattered, and a son who thought his father was a hero, and a system that was changing. Because sometimes one person crossing one yellow line was enough. Marcus fell asleep thinking about sounds only he could hear, about the difference between fixing broken things and preventing them from breaking, about a 10-year-old boy who'd watched his father struggle and survive and decided both were worth admiring, about the truth that persistence and skill and integrity eventually found their value even when the world tried hard to deny it. Outside, Phoenix lights glowed against desert darkness. Inside, a family that had been fractured by injustice was whole again. And somewhere across the country, mechanics were filing reports without fear, speaking truth without consequences, making aviation safer because one man remembered his father's advice and followed it regardless of cost. If you can fix it, fix it. The rest is just noise.